What up, my people, and welcome to another episode of DaleDC, coming to you from right here in Audi Field. I'm your host, Chad Ricardo. Now, each and every week, we bring you some superstars and special guests. We're talking about everything from writers to entertainers to players from the squad and more. If it is black and red and it is fun and important to the team and you all, it's going to be right here on DaleDC. Today, we've got a very special guest, MLS writer, and my dear friend, Charlie Boehm, joins us. Let's go. Hey, so Charlie, thank you so very much for joining us here today on DaleDC. I don't know if you know this or not, but this is the hottest show around talking about all things that are important to the black and red here. Thank you.
It's a thrill. It's a thrill. Thanks for having me on.
I want to talk about you, right? Because obviously not just your job as a writer, but your entire path to make it here. How did you go from being a child into what is now considered by many a dream job?
It is. I do feel fortunate in that sense. It was a long time coming, though. Actually, I can point to DC United for my roots in this gig. For almost a decade. I think it was about 8 years. I covered DC United. I was a beat writer for the league website, which was at that time, way back in the day here, MLSnet.com, back in the aughts, and it was a side hustle. I was able to do it on a part-time basis. Covered some great teams, including an MLS Cup winner in my very first year of doing it in 2004. And then a little over a decade ago, I was able to make the leap into a full-time gig. So.
Wow.
It was, soccer journalism kind of almost didn't exist in this country.
That's what I'm talking about.
Just
yes.
a couple decades ago. So it's not an easy landscape at the moment, but we're growing, and I feel very fortunate to be a part of it.
To that point, I think that, yourself in covering the team, working with MLS, for myself, being a sports journalist in and of itself, I think that people see the end product, right? And they're like, oh my gosh, that person is so lucky. Oh my gosh, they got here overnight. But it really is a journey. There's a grind to it. You kind of alluded to that a moment ago. Speak to what your process has been in getting here.
Well, those people should probably know that I was getting paid $25 a story when I got going, and there were people doing it for free around me, right? So this is kind of one of the paradoxes, I think, of working in sports. There are dream jobs. It's a sector that a lot of people want to be in, but that also actually leads to challenging working conditions. I mean, because so many people want to be in this field, the wages are not what they should be. That's right. A lot of organizations, a lot of entire sports landscapes run on free or discounted labor, right? So
that's right.
So again, I do feel super fortunate to be able to do what I do for a living full time. But there's so many people, like the way I describe it sometimes is almost like a feudal economy, because you have a few full-time people at the top of it, yes, and then you have this enormous pool of people who are grinding, like doing it as a passion project, doing it as a side hustle, trying to get into the field and make a name or make a living. So it has its challenges for sure.
When you look back at it over the span of your career to date, what have been some of your favorite moments that you've covered?
Here's one for the old timers.
Yeah.
If there's any black and red old heads listening, one of that first year, 2004, I'd actually applied to again, the old heads will remember ESPN's soccer website used to be called SoccerNet. And I was there. I'd moved to DC less than a year before, and I had saw a posting. There was a job posting. They were looking for writers in MLS markets. So I sent off an application, didn't hear about it for months. And then one day I got a call, this was in June, and it was a guy, whole long story, but a guy in England calls me up and says, hey, I saw that you're in DC and you're interested in writing. Can you go to the game tonight? And I was sort of like, he's like, yeah, all you need is a laptop. And I was like, okay, sure. I did not have a laptop, but I got my hands on one. And he's like, and it was like, okay, if you go, it was LA Galaxy at DC United, and it was sort of like an audition. It was like, can you go write a story? Back then we did recaps. So like you did a gamer where you filed it at the whistle. And this was so long ago, you were plugging into the internet. This was pre-Wi-Fi. And then you ran downstairs and got quotes in the locker room, and then you did a cider. We call it a cider. So it was 2 stories, $50. I don't know if I got paid for that first one because it was an audition.
Come on now.
But that was, so from there, like I guess I did well enough to where I started covering the team. Freddie Adu's rookie season.
Yeah, man.
The DC United made it to the final. I got to go cover the MLS Cup in what we called the Home Depot Center back then, which is now Dignity Hill Sports Park out in LA. Incredible experience, and the most, still I think the most memorable and maybe just the best, most exciting soccer game I've ever been at in person was the Eastern Conference final that year. Again, if you were there, you won't forget. RFK Stadium was rocking, like 20, 30,000 people. New England Revolution had Clint Dempsey on their team.
Right.
You had Nick Raimondo and Jaime Moreno and Aleko Eskandarian on the home team. They go to, I think it was 3-3, go to extra time, penalty kicks, just an epic night. DC United win on penalties. And I actually just saw that there's clips from that game in the new Clint Dempsey documentary that just came out on Paramount Plus, because he got saved by Nick Raimondo in the shootout for the game deciding spot kick. And so, I think that was probably where I got hooked. And you're right that it's a job, but there's also an element of passion to it. And so that one sticks out a lot, right? Because that was one of those bricks in the road that got me here.
Wow. When I was, I'll get the number of years incorrectly here, but there was one season, the year that Wayne Rooney came. I was actually the in-game host here for DC United, so I did the starting 11 calls and all of the goal calls. Rooney, when the match in which his nose was bloodied and he had a phenomenal play in that match, that was one of my most memorable moments. Were you around during that?
2018, year one. I mean, that was a wild season because that was when Audi opened. Didn't open until midsummer. They had to play a ton of road games. They played a game. They had to play 2 home games somewhere else. So they played in Annapolis at the Naval Academy Stadium one game. They played up at the Soccerplex. I think it was snowing. Yeah. It was just like, the Soccerplex is a whole vibe unto itself out in Germantown. And then it was sort of like, all right, Rooney's here. We got the new stadium, but we're however many games out of the playoffs, right?
Sure.
And then there was just this wild race against time. Could DC United make a run and get into the playoffs? And sure enough, they did. And Lucho Acosta and Wayne Rooney had this bromance to develop, Lucho-Roo, we called it. And it was like, after so many years of sort of lean years in the last years at RFK, they had to go Moneyball with the squad and try and kind of just compete on a budget.
That's right.
Ben Olsen's, Benny Ball's, years, and then it was like the magic was back in year one at Audi Field, and certainly a memorable occasion. I remember it was wild because you would suddenly DC was back on the national soccer map, right? So you had the Fox crews were here. You had the national reporters coming through, and it was like, it was a trip, man. That was a euphoric season for sure.
It was euphoric. And I recall, again, just being here, the in-game environment with all of the supporters. I mean, you're talking about Audi Field being absolutely packed and this place rocking. What's that like for the team when they have that kind of support and that kind of home field advantage?
The story of DC United starts with the history, right? And the legacy of the stars over the crest, the memories, there's this organizational memory, and that can hang heavy, right? That can be that can feel like a lot of weight. But when you can recapture that, it's like it's just special, and it starts to feel like a tough place to play again, right? And people feel like there's a 12th man.
That's right.
It hasn't always been that way, right? And there's been too few of the seasons since Audi opened where it's felt that way. But when it's there, it's like it's so powerful. And this league is a moving target, right? And we'll probably get into this a little bit more in a minute. But it's become very difficult to compete and to get back up and to stay up, right? Much less is even more difficult. But I think you have those moments that you can look back on, not just as an organization, but the community around the club, and you can remember it. And it's hard to say this, right? Because it's a challenge, but that's the standard. If you can get back to that standard, people buy in, people remember, and you can get people's attention. This is a great soccer market. This is an incredible soccer city, right?
Major soccer market.
And people have high expectations though, and so you've got to be playing winning soccer and enjoyable soccer that inspires people. And so I think the shoes are bigger here, but
Yeah.
if you fill them, then something special can take place.
It's a hell of a quote. I like that a lot. I'm going to use that on my own. We'll use that point to fast forward to now. You know, we're in the early part of the season. Thus far, things have maybe not come together in the way that a lot of the supporters and the fan base would have liked for it to have done so. What are we, 8 games into the season at this point? Give me the pulse of where it is that this team is.
So I think there was some early momentum in the first few weeks. I mean, starting off beating Philly on opening day the way they did was just an ideal start to things, right? And the emotions were there. And again, that the vibe was real. I mean, I think Ty Baribo has been selected by the technical staff as kind of one of the cornerstones of this project. And so for him to get off the mark the way he did against his old team, I mean, that was great. But I think you've seen that momentum has sort of sputtered out a little bit now. We're speaking in the aftermath of they stopped the bleeding a little bit with the 0-0 in Philly last weekend, but the sting from the Open Cup upset to Knoxville is going to reverberate for a while. I mean, games like that I think can leave a mark, especially when you see the frustration that Rene Weiler expressed. Right, he was really down on what he saw, I think what he would describe as like some naivety, some lack of commitment, a lack of intensity. And the whole game model that DC United has built the project on, which is a Philly-inspired one in many ways, right, is intensity. You have to win your duels. Whether or not you're good with a ball on a given night, or things are working for you in terms of the X's and O's, the attacking rhythm, if that's not on, you still have to be hard to play against. You have to get stuck in. You have to make everything difficult for the opponent, right? And if the level dips, then you can get like a kind of a failure cascade going if things don't go well. And so I think we're seeing now there's questions for everybody to answer. The coach has called on the players to do more. I think the players have to be feeling that at the moment, right? And the way that this MLS season is structured, it's a crucial key few weeks coming up here because you have a long break for the World Cup. It's about 7 weeks for the World Cup. That's how you go into that is going to sort of affect how you go about the rest of the season.
Come on now.
Right? So do you have momentum going into that? Do you have to make changes? Do you have to go out and think about the summer transfer window a little bit differently, right? I think we're still wondering if there's enough quality on the team, if there's enough talent on this roster to compete in a very difficult Eastern Conference. Do you have the horses? And then are you getting the most out of what you have? So definitely questions to answer. If you can get a little bit of a rhythm going and a little bit of a run in April and May, then you can feel a lot better about yourself maybe. But if you limp into the World Cup break, it's
damn near like you're going on vacation if that's the case. And that's a challenge. You spoke a moment ago about Coach, and I'll tell you, as he came in, this is his first full season here with the club. And as he came in, I'm looking and I'm saying, culture change. You look at his resume, you look at everything that he's accomplished thus far, and it's early, so maybe it's not even fair, but thus far, what impact have you seen from Coach on this organization?
So the interactions I've had with him, I've been impressed. I think Rene is a very experienced football hand. I mean, he's been around. He's played he's worked in different leagues, in different environments around the world, and I think he's been sort of catching up to what MLS involves, and then what's the cultural context at this club. He's had conversations. I mean, people like me, I'm struck by I think his thoughtfulness in trying to understand the deeper circumstances. What's really going on here? Why have things not worked by and large for most of the last several years, right? We're going on a decade now where I think we've only had one playoff game, one or maybe two playoff games at this venue, which is not what anybody expects, right? That's not up to anyone's idea of what this organization is about. And so I think he's sort of taken in the information. Now the question is, what does he do with it? He was catching up to things arriving in midseason last year. Now he had a role with him and Eric Sogut working together on the off-season moves they made, the acquisitions. They spent a significant amount of money, right? For a long time, there was a perception that DC United didn't spend, that they were cheap in terms of the roster build. That's no longer the case. I mean, there were some records set over the winter. So now it's about he's had more role in what he has at his disposal. He could maybe make an argument that he's going to need more, that they're going to have to go out and get active in the summer window. but he's had an input in a lot of what they've done so far. I think we've seen a little bit of what Ty Baribo can do. We haven't seen much from Lewis, right? Lewis Montano has his first few months here have been disrupted by injuries, and it just seems to be an inability to get up to match fitness. So he's only getting mostly these cameos. That strike partnership, Montano and Baribo, is supposed to be sort of the cornerstone of things, right?
Right.
And they've spent very little time on the field together in these first 8 weeks. So I think Rene has educated himself, and now he's going to be a little bit more in the spotlight in terms of what he does and how he gets the most out of his resources.
You talk about Ty, and I recall on Ty's opening presser, I mean, from hearing the words that come out of his mouth, hearing his, I'm a big basketball Los Angeles Lakers fan. I'm a huge Kobe Bryant fan, and in listening to Ty Baribo, I hear Mamba mentality. I hear culture changer. I hear someone. So my expectations were instant impact, both on the pitch as well as in the locker room for him. 3 goals thus far this season. We know, though, overall that this the offense has struggled thus far for this team. What kind of pressure is on a Ty Baribo right now?
He's a fascinating character. I got to sit down with him at length last season when he was with Philadelphia, and he was one of my favorite profile subjects of last year. He is such a worker, right? And he's an intelligent worker, though. And I hope everybody, if you're inclined to learn more about him, I profiled him. I think it was about a year ago, maybe last May. His story of coming up in a kind of an isolated corner of Israel called Eilat, and he was literally flying back and forth. I mean, his dad put in so much work. He lost his mother very young to cancer, and as from age 12 or so, he was flying across Israel to get developed in an academy in Tel Aviv. And so he and his family were making these sacrifices, and he was on a professional mindset so early. And I think you see it, right? You see his work ethic on and off the field, his diligence. He had a phrase that stuck with me when we talked, clean the box. And he would talk about, like, when you look at how he finishes, so many of his goals are one-touch finishes because he's in the right place at the right time in the penalty box. He knows where goals are scored. He sniffs stuff out. He's not necessarily a guy that's going to dribble past 3 dudes and create his own shot. He needs the service.
That's right.
And his team needs to be spending time in the box, to get into the final third and to spend time there in order for him to poach. And so I think he's been starved for service so far. And I don't know whether that involves changing the personnel around him or shifting how they work together, what the patterns of play are. But I think for Ty, he's going to put in that work. He works his butt off the ball as a defensive forward, in his pressing work. I think there's so much to work with there, but he's not necessarily the messy type that can just pick the ball up and make magic, right? He's the tip of the spear for a cohesive system. And so again, that's work for his coach and his teammates, is to deliver him what he needs.
From your perspective, it's a great question here, right? So from your perspective, with Ty being the player that he is and an attacker in the way that you say that he is, are those pieces, from your perspective, currently on this team?
I think we would have to give it a grade of incomplete right now because, again, I think it was somewhere around $7 million a transfer fee, if I remember correctly, was spent on Lewis to bring him over from Romania. This is an international caliber player, a Romanian international who has shown real quality, right? He's spent time with a Serie A club in Italy, I believe it was Fiorentina, but we just haven't seen much of him. We don't know much about the behind the scenes there, right? And I don't know whether he's still working to win over Weiler's trust. I don't know if he's just simply hasn't been at the physical level to be logging the minutes that you want. But you need to see those two players working up top, building rhythm, building an understanding, and starting to get the sample size, right? Right now, there's just not enough sample size. And again, it's relatively early, but it can get early late in this league where it's very competitive, and you don't want to have to be sort of climbing up and catching up as the summer, the miles start to tick upward and the weather gets hot in the summer.
To that point, it's a huge week. 2 matches on deck this week. As you look at this team right now, where do you see them at beyond the record? Just looking at the team, where do you see them at right now headed into this week?
I think the best version of this DC United right now has to have a chip on its collective shoulder, because they haven't proven anything to anyone yet, right? And to be frank, like as in terms of someone who talks about and thinks about and writes about this league on a national or a league-wide level, DC United are not in the conversation, and they haven't been there. They don't have that pedigree over the last decade or so, and so they've got to sort of elbow their way into that. And you do that with, look, I often say there's two ways to attract attention in MLS. You can spend money or you can win games. Some teams are able to do both, right? But that's the thing. I mean, they've spent some money all over the winter, nothing to a dramatic extent like you see at the top end of the league spenders. But it appeared that they had a plan and that they had steps that they were taking. So now it's like they've got to go out and prove it week in, week out. And they've got to prove something to themselves. They've got to win over a fan base that's pretty hard-boiled at this point. I think there's a lot of frustration among the fans. They need to see something, right? And this group itself, I mean, their coach has called them out relatively recently now. So I think you want to see an edge. Again, I've shown my age here, but this is the Atlantic Cup this week, right?
That's right.
Red Bulls, DC United that was the first great rivalry of this league.
Wow.
And it's lost a little bit of its luster between New York City FC coming along with Philly coming around, and it doesn't have the same juice, again, on a national level, but people around the club know that this matters. This game matters to the old heads, and it's a moment where you can, turn some heads, again, because the Red Bulls have done this, right? The New York Red Bulls are in kind of a comparable stage of their product. They've got a first-year coach, Michael Bradley, who has had a couple great performances with a very young squad. They've got 3 teenagers from their academy who are starting. At their best, they play beautiful soccer. They've also lost to a bottom dweller in CF Montreal over the last couple of weeks here. So I think it's an opportunity for DC to kind of wake the echoes a little bit.
That's right.
And again, now physically, it's a challenge, right? This is the first double game week outside from the Open Cup. How does Rene go about it? Do you ride with your starting rotation? Do you give them the 2 games? Do you spread things out? Are there guys on the training ground who've made an impression, who deserve an opportunity now that results have dipped? So very interesting couple of matches, I think, for us to watch.
Red Bulls, again, coming up on Wednesday. You speak to that rivalry. I was just at the facility. The team was loading the buses. They were ready to get up and head out to New York. What does the team have to do to get a W there?
Yeah, so the Red Bulls are trying to evolve their style, right? This is we kind of call it car crash soccer, right? Philly and the Red Bulls were the 2 of the most direct, rugged, physical teams in this league.
Wow.
RBNY want to be able to also play and do proactive and creative things with the ball, and at their best, again, this season they've shown that they've been very good. They held Inter Miami to a draw in their trip down to the new stadium in Miami. Mehmeti in central midfield has been great. Julian Hall is a teenager who is maybe the best young striker in the league. I think you have to be aware of those danger people, those danger men in the lineup, and how they throw numbers forward. They pass and move. I mean, it's a really attractive style when it works. They do take risks as well. So again, this is a DC United team that is meant to cook on the counter, right? So I think you're going to have to be able to absorb pressure and then hit out in transition. They're going to give you those spaces. They're going to give you those opportunities. Let's see how they make the most of it. And again, but it's always going to come down to the physical battles, especially right from the jump. This is going to be, I expect, a lot of tackles flying in the early moments of this game, and they've got to assert themselves and show that they're up for the fight first and foremost.
Cooking on the counter. I'm taking notes on that. I'll put it in my own copy coming up a little later on today. All right, so that's Wednesday. Saturday, Orlando. What do we got?
Orlando, as people are probably going to note, are giving up goals at a historic level.
Well, we need that. That's what the doctor ordered.
Exactly. I mean, Orlando have been really struggled with their defensive work. They're on track to leak more than 100 goals, I think, which would smash the MLS record for most goals conceded. They are low on confidence as a result. I think this is an opponent where you, again, have to go out and assert yourself, try and land the first punch.
Yeah.
make Orlando feel like it's another one of those rough nights, and I think that's going to again require. We saw DC kind of, again, I used the phrase "stop the bleeding" earlier in Philly last weekend to try and sort of build a foundation defensively. Here, I think you want to go and push the line high, get after it, put Orlando back in that same mind space that they've been in with some of the ugly losses they've had this season. Because if you give them confidence, they can play. I mean, there is a core of a group that has been on deep playoff runs with that Orlando team the last couple of years, but they've already changed their coach. I think the points are there for DC United, but you got to go out and get them.
Looking at these two crucial matchups here this weekend, what spells success amongst them? Is it a win and a draw? Is it 2 wins? What is a successful week look like in these crucial matchups?
I mean, I think right now you want to avoid defeat, but I think 4 points certainly is a very realistic goal from these 2 games. And if you can go beyond that, then you start to feel like you've got something building, right? And you've got a little bit of momentum. And again, momentum is so crucial in this league.
All total, in the Eastern Conference, all about, because obviously despite what could be described as a slow start, we're still relatively early in the season. Like you said, you want to build here before we get to that break. So all total, where is DC United beyond the record in the Eastern Conference?
8 weeks in is where you start to see the table take shape. The sample sizes are getting big enough that you can start to make bigger conclusions about teams. We're seeing a little bit of an elite start to pull away. Nashville SC has been very, very good so far. They are at the top of the East table while also reaching the semifinals of CONCACAF Champions Cup. So that's a wagon. That's the standard at the moment.
Yeah.
It says a lot that a team like Miami, the defending champs, they're still stacked with talent, right? They spent $15 million on their showcase acquisition over the winter. They're kind of scuffling along in mid-table, right? But you know that over time they're probably gonna start to climb as they smooth out their issues. So I think DC has to be looking at, the playoffs are the goal, right? The playoffs are the standard.
Yeah.
That top 9, I think most people would put them in. I think a lot of predictions have DC United outside of the playoff places. But if you're in the mix, if you're in that mid-table zone there where you can feel like, we're keeping pace. We're not getting left behind. You're not giving yourself a big task down the stretch.
All total, and you kind of alluded to this a moment ago, but all total, when we look at the start of this season, what are your takeaways, positive and negative, and how does the team capitalize on those things moving forward?
Again, I think with Weiler and Erget Sogut's approach, they're very clear. I mean, we were there at the Baribo unveiling, right? Everybody involved was very clear about the identity they want to have. They want to be a rugged team. They want to be difficult to play against. They want to be physically strong and imposing, and then be able to play a little bit of soccer above and beyond that. So I think we're still waiting to see that, right? Like there's, unfortunately, when you're trying to build a reputation and make up for some underachievement of the last several seasons, your losses count more than your wins in a lot of ways, right? You're trying to win over the public. You're trying to win over the rest of the league. You're trying to win over confidence amongst yourselves. So I think we have to see that identity that sort of assert itself, even on a bad night, right? Whether you're winning or losing, you're true to yourself. You know who you are. One thing I'll say about the Union, who are such an influential kind of model for not just DC, but other clubs around this league, they know who they are, right? Even on a bad night, you see the identity, the DNA. I think we're still waiting to see what that looks like for DC. Like, who are the guys that are going to be bringing it week in, week out? Who are the ones that are going to be putting in the work, right, on both sides of the ball? So I think they've been challenged now, again, by their coach publicly. These next few weeks are the moment where they kind of show that they're capable, right? The guys that are able to live up to that identity and that aspiration they have will be getting more minutes. And the guys that don't are going to be pushed to the side.
Absolutely phenomenal. I'll get you out of here on this. And we're early now, but like you said, it can get late early when you look at the MLS season. When we get to the end of it, it will have been Coach Weiler's first complete season here. It'll be Baribo's first complete season here, etc. What is a successful year? Is it playoffs? Is it the knowledge that you're moving in the right direction? Is it the knowledge that you didn't finish in last place? What is success at the end of this season?
I think playoff qualification has to be a key metric, right? Because the MLS system is relatively forgiving, right? You can stay in it late, even if things don't go well for you in the early stages. There's 9 slots to go and vie for. That there's still a kind of a hierarchy within that, right? Because we're seeing it's very difficult for a lower seeded team to make a deep run. So if you're serious about trophy aspirations, about MLS Cup, you've got to be, playing playoff games at home. For DC right now, I think it's be in the playoff mix, get into the top 9. One of the things that really hurts about that early Open Cup exit is a tournament like Open Cup can give you something else to aim for, right? It can give you another front to fight on. So you don't have that now, but you still got, you've got to kind of find that in another way, right? Is it going to be rivalry wins? Is it going to be, now they've taken 4 points of 6 from Philly, which that's the near neighbor, right? That matters for something. Does a Red Bulls result, carry a little bit of extra weight? Where do you find those things? And so, and then there's players who are thinking about their own international aspirations, trying to get onto the radar for their national teams. There's all those kind of different ways you can sort of provide motivation and make the season sort of chop, these bite size.
That's right.
But I think the playoff run is going to be key right now. With no Open Cup, it's like you've got to go get it. And I do think it's there for them if they can find out who they are, if they can find dependable contributors, if they can find a consistent way of playing and picking up points, then you start to build something down the stretch. But it's early, right?
It's early, right? That is absolutely great information. The incomparable Charlie Boehm. Thank you so very much for stopping by DaleDC.
Great to chop it up.
That's going to do it for this week's show. I want to give a special shout out to everyone who made this episode possible, and of course, to our guest, Charlie Boehm. I'm your host, Chad Ricardo, and this is DaleDC.